Women Who Run with the Wolves. Chapter 10. Clear Water. Nourishing the Creative Life. Creativity is a shape changer. One moment it takes this form, the next that. It's like a dazzling spirit who appears to us all, yet is hard to describe, for no one agrees on what they saw in that brilliant flash. Are the wielding of pigments and canvas or paint chips and wallpaper evidence of its existence? How about pen and paper, flowery borders on the garden path, building a university? Yes, ironing a collar well, cooking up a revolution? Yes, touching with love the leaves of a plant, pulling down the big deal, tying off the loom, finding one's voice, loving someone well. Yes. Catching the hot body of the newborn, raising a child to adulthood, helping raise a nation from its knees. Yes. Tending to a marriage like the orchard it is, digging for psychic gold, finding the shapely word, sewing a blue curtain. All are of the creative life. All these things are from the wild woman, the rio abajo rio, the river beneath the river, which flows and flows into our lives. Some say the creative life is in ideas. Some say it is in doing. It seems, in most instances, to be in a simple being. It is not virtuosity, although that is very fine in itself. It is the love of something, having so much love for something, whether a person, a word, an image, an idea, the land, or humanity, that all can be done with the overflow is to create. It's not a matter of wanting to, not a singular act of will. One solely must. The creative force flows over the terrain of our psyches, looking for the natural hollows, the arroyos, the channels that exist in us. We become its tributaries, its basins. We are its pools, ponds, streams, and sanctuaries. The wild creative force flows into whatever beds we have for it, those we are born with as well as those we dig with our own hands. We don't have to fill them, we only have to build them. In archetypal lore, there is the idea that if one prepares a special psychic space, then the being, the creative force, the soul source, will hear of it, sense its way to it, and inhabit that place. Whether this force is summoned by the biblical go forward and prepare a place for the soul, or as in the film Field of Dreams, in which a farmer hears a voice urging him to build a baseball diamond for the spirits of players past. If you build it, they will come. Preparing a fitting place induces the great creative force to advance. Once that great underground river finds its estuaries and branches in our psyches, our creative lives fill and empty, rise and fall, in seasons, just like a wild river. These cycles cause things to be made, fed, fall back, and die away, all in their own right time, and over again. Creating one thing at a certain point in the river feeds those who come to the river, feeds creatures far downstream, yet others in the deep. Creativity is not a solitary movement. That is its power. Whatever is touched by it, whoever hears it, sees it, senses it, knows it, is fed. That is why beholding someone else's creative word, image, idea fills us up, inspires us to do our own creative work. A single creative act has a potential to feed a continent. One creative act can cause a torrent to break through stone. For this reason, a woman's creative ability is her most valuable asset, for it gives outwardly and feeds her inwardly at every level, psychic, spiritual, mental, emotive, and economic. The wild nature pours out endless possibilities, acts as birth channel, invigorates this creative river, slakes thirst, satiates our hunger for the deep and wild life. Ideally, this creative river has no dams on it, no diversions, and especially no misuse. Wild Woman's River nurtures and grows us into beings that are like her, life givers. As we create, this wild and precious being is creating us in return, filling us with love. We are evoked in the way creatures are evoked by sun and water. We are made so alive that we in turn give life out. We burst, we bloom, we divide and multiply. We impregnate, incubate, impart, give forth. Clearly, creativity emanates from something that rises, rolls, surges and spills into us, rather than from something that just stands there, hoping that we might, however circuitously, find our way into it. In that sense, we can never lose our creativity. It's always there, filling us or else colliding with whatever obstacles we are placing in its path. If it finds no inlet to it, it backs up, gathers energy, and rams forward, again until it breaks through. The only ways we can avoid its insistent energy are to continuously mount barriers against it, or to allow it to be poisoned by destructive negativity and negligence. If we are gasping for creative energy, if we have trouble pulling down the fertile, the imaginative, the ideational, if we have difficulty focusing on our personal vision, acting on it, or following through with it, then something has gone wrong at the waterspill juncture between the headwaters and the tributary. Perhaps one's creative waters are flowing through a polluting environment where the life forms of imagination are killed off before they can grow to maturity. More often than not, when a woman is bereft of her creative life, all these circumstances are at the root of the issue. There are other, more insidious possibilities as well. Perhaps one so admires the gifts of another, or the seeming benefits earned or retrieved by another, that one becomes expert in mimicry, sadly content to be mediocre them, rather than developing one's own unique gifts to their absolute startling depths. Perhaps one has become caught in the hyper-fascination or hero worship and has no idea how to mine their own inimitable gifts. Perhaps one is afraid, for the waters are deep, the night is dark, and the way is very long. Just the right conditions needed for development of one's original and precious gifts. Since the wild woman is Rio abajo Rio, the river beneath the river, when she flows into us, we flow. If the aperture from her to us is blocked, we are blocked. If her currents are toptified by our own negative inner complexes or by the environs of persons around us, a delicate process that crafts our ideas are also blocked. Then we are like a dying river. This is not a slight thing to be ignored. The loss of clear creative flow constitutes a psychological and spiritual crisis. When a river is tainted, everything begins to die off, because as we know from environmental biology, every life form is dependent on every other life form. If in an actual river the sedge at the water's edge turns brown, starving for oxygen, then the pollens can find nothing vibrant enough to fertilize. Water plantain falls over, leaving no cribs amongst its roots for water lilies. Willows will not grow catkins. Newts will find no mates, and mayflies will not hatch. Therefore the fish will not jump, birds will not dive down, and the wolves and other creatures that come to refresh themselves move or else die from drinking bad water or from eating prey that has eaten the dying plants near the water. When creativity stagnates in one way or another, there is the same outcome, a starving for freshness, a fragility of fertility, no place for smaller life forms to live in the interstices of larger life forms. No breeding of this idea to that one, no hatch, no new life. Then we feel ill and we want to move on. We wander aimlessly, pretending we can get along without the lush creative life, or else by faking one. But we cannot, we must not. To bring back creative life, the waters have to be made clean and clear again. We have to wade into the sludge, purify the contaminants, reopen the apertures, protect the flow from future harm. Among Spanish-speaking people, there is an old tale called La Llorona, the weeping woman. Some say it has originated in the early 1500s when the conquistadors invaded the Aztec people of Mexico, but it is actually far older than that. It is a tale about the river of life that became a river of death. The protagonist protagonista is a haunting river woman who is fertile and generous, creating out of her own body. She is poor, breathtakingly beautiful, but rich in soul and spirit. La Llorona is an odd tale, for it continues to evolve throughout time as though it is a big inner life of its own. Like a great marching sand dune that pushes across the land, taking up what is before it, building with and upon it until the land becomes part of its own body. This story builds on the psychic issues of each generation. Sometimes the La Llorona tale is told as a story about Malinali or Malinche, the native woman said to have been translator and lover to the Spanish conqueror Hernán Cortés. But the first version of La Llorona I ever heard described her as the female protagonist in a Union-busting war up in the North Woods where I was raised. The next time I heard the tale, La Llorona was dealing with an antagonist involved in the forced repatriation of Mexicans from the United States in the 1950s. I heard the story in numerous versions in the Southwest, one being from the old Spanish land grant farmers who said she was involved in the land grant wars in New Mexico. A rich developer took advantage of a poor but beautiful Spanish daughter. Then there is the spooky story of La Llorona, wanders and wails through the trailer park at night. There is a prostitute with AIDS tale. La Llorona plies her trade down the river at the town river in Austin. The most startling one I was given by a young child. First I will tell you the general storyline of the great La Llorona tales, and then a most astonishing twist on the story. A rich hidalgo, nobleman, courts a beautiful but poor woman and wins her affections. She bears him 2 sons, but he deigns not to marry her. One day he announces that he is returning to Spain, where he will marry a rich woman chosen by his family, and that he will take his sons with him. The young woman is crazed and acts in the manner of the great shrieking madwomen throughout time. She claws his face, she claws her own face, she tears at him, she tears at herself, she picks up the 2 small sons and runs to the river with them, and there throws them into the torrent. The children drown, and La Llorona falls to the riverbank in grief and dies. The hidalgo returns to Spain and marries the rich woman. The soul of La Llorona ascends to heaven. There the master of the gate tells her she may come to heaven, for she has suffered, but that she may not enter until she recovers the souls of her children from the river. And that is why it's said today that La Llorona, the reaping woman, sweeps the river banks with her long hair, puts her long stick fingers into the water to drag the bottom for her children. It's also why living children must not go near the riverbank after dark, for La Llorona may mistake them for her own children and take them away forever. Now, to a modern La Llorona. As the culture is affected by various influences, our thinking, our attitudes, and our issues shift. The La Llorona story shifts too. While in Colorado last year collecting ghost stories, Danny Salazar, a 10-year-old child with no front teeth and surrealistically big feet on his skinny but someday to be tall body, gave me this tale. He told me that La Llorona did not kill her children for the reasons described in the old tale. No, asserted Danny. La Llorona went with a high hidalgo who had factories on the river, but something went wrong. During her pregnancy, La Llorona drank from the river. Her babies, twin boys, were born blind and with webbed fingers, for the hidalgo had poisoned the river with the waste from his factories. The hidalgo told La Llorona that he didn't want her babies. He married a rich woman who wanted the things the factory manufactured. La Llorona threw the babies into the river because they would have such a hard life. Then she fell down dead from grief. She went to heaven, but St. Peter told her she could not come into heaven until she found the souls of her sons. Now La Llorona looks and looks through the polluted river for her children, but she can hardly see, for the water is so dirty and dark. Now her ghost drags the river bottom with her long fingers. Now she wanders the river banks, calling for her children all the time. The pollution of the wild soul. La Llorona belongs to the category of tales that the cantadoras y cuentistas in our family call temblon, shiver stories. These overtly entertain, but they are meant to cause listeners to experience a shiver of awareness that leads to thoughtfulness, contemplation, and action. Regardless of the shifting motifs within the story over time, the theme remains the same: the destruction of the fertile feminine. Whether the contamination of wild beauty takes place in the inner world or the outer world, it is painful to witness. In modern culture, we sometimes count one as far more devastating than the other, but both are equally critical. Although I sometimes tell this two-version tale in other contexts, when understood as a metaphor for the deterioration of the creative flow, it causes everyone, women and men alike, to shiver with knowing aplenty. If we view this tale of the condition of a single woman's psyche, we can understand a good deal about the weakening and wasting of a woman's creative process. As in other stories that have harsh endings, the tale is instrumental in teaching a woman what not to do, and how to back out of poor choices in order to lessen negative impact. Generally, by taking the opposite psychological tack to that chosen by the protagonist in the tale, we can learn to ride the swell instead of drowning in it. This tale uses the metaphor of the beautiful woman and the pure river of life to describe a woman's creative process in its normative state. But here, when interactive with a destructive animus, both the woman and the river decline. When a woman whose creative life is dwindling experiences, like La Llorona, a sensation of poisoning, defamation, a desire to kill off everything, subsequently as she is driven to seemingly endless searching through the wreckage of her former creative potential. In order for her psychic ecology to be righted, the river has to be made clear once again. It is not the quality of our creative products that we are concerned with through this story, but the individual's recognition of the value of one's unique gifts and the method for caring for the creative life that surrounds those gifts. Always behind the actions of writing, painting, thinking, healing, doing, cooking, talking, smiling, making, is the river. The rio, abajo rio, the river under the river, nourishes everything we make. In symbology, the great bodies of water express the place where life itself is thought to have originated. In the Hispanic Southwest, the river symbolizes the ability to live, truly live. It is greeted as the mother, la madre grande, la muy grande, the great woman, whose waters not only run in the ditches and riverbeds, but spill out of the various bodies of women themselves as their babies are born. The river is seen as the grand dama, who walks the land with a full swirling skirt of blue or silver and sometimes gold, who lays with the soil to make it good for growing. Some of the old women friends in South Texas say El Rio Grande could never be a man river, but it is a woman river. They laugh and say, how can a river be anything but la dulce acequia, the sweet slot between the thighs of the earth? In northern New Mexico, the river in storm, in wind, in flash flood is spoken of as the one who is aroused, the one who in her heat rushes to touch everything she can to make it grow. So we see that the river here symbolizes a form of feminine largesse that arouses, excites, makes passionate. Women's eyes flash as they create, their words lilt, their faces flush with light, their very hair seems to shine all the more. They are excited by the idea, aroused by the possibilities, impassioned by the very thought, and at that point, like the great river, they are meant to flow outward and continuously on their own unparalleled creative path. This is the way that women feel fulfilled, and this is the condition of the river that La Llorona once lived by before destruction occurred. But sometimes, as in the tale, the woman's creative life is taken over as something that wants to manufacture things of and for ego only, things which have no lasting soul worth. Sometimes there are pressures from her culture that say her creative ideas are useless, that no one will want them, that it is futile for her to continue. This is pollution. This is pouring lead into the river. This is what poisons the psyche. Ego satisfaction is allowable and important in its own regard. The problem is that the spewing out of negative complexes attacks all freshness, newness, potential, newbornness, things in the pupae stage, the lacuna, as well as the half-grown and the old and revered. When there is too much soulless or mocking manufacturing, toxic waste pours into the pure river, killing off both creative impulse and energy. Poison in the river. There are many myths about the pollution of and the sealing off of the creative in the wild, whether they be about the contamination of purity as personified by the noxious fog that once spread over the island Lycia, where the skeins of life with which the fates wove were stored, or tales about evil doers stopping up village wells, thereby causing suffering and death. Two of the most profound stories are the latter des Jean de Florette and Manon of the Spring. In those tales, two men, hoping to deprive a poor hunchback man and his wife and little daughter of the land they are attempting to bring to life with flowers and trees, seal off the spring that feeds that land, causing the destruction of the soulful and hard-working family. The most common effect of pollution in woman's creative life is a loss of vitality. This disables a woman's ability to create or act out there in the world. Though there are times in a woman's cycles of healthy creative life where the river of creativity disappears underground for a time, something is being developed all the same. We are incubating then. It's a very different sensation than that of spiritual crisis. In a natural cycle, there is restlessness and impatience, perhaps, but there is never a sense of the wild soul dying. We can tell the difference by assessing our anticipation. Even when our creative energy is involved in a long incubation, we still look forward to the outcome. We feel the pops and surges of that new life turning and humming within us. We do not feel desperate. There is no lunging and grasping. But when the creative life dies because we are not tending to the health of the river, that is another matter entirely. Then we feel exactly like the dying river. We feel loss of energy. We feel tired. There is nothing creeping, roiling, lifting leaves, cooling off, warming up. We become thick, slow in a negative way, poisoned by pollution or by a backup and stagnation of all our riches. Everything feels tainted, unclear, and toxic. How might a woman's life become polluted? The sludging of creative life invades all 5 phases of creation: inspiration, concentration, organization, implementation, and sustenance. Women who have lost one or more of these report that they can't think of anything new, useful, or empathic for themselves. They are easily distracted by love affairs, too much work, too much play, by tiredness, or by fear of failure. Sometimes they cannot coalesce the mechanics of organization, and their project lays scattered about in 100 places and pieces. Sometimes the problems issue from a woman's naivety about her own extroversion. She thinks that by making a few motions in the outer world, she's really done something. This is like making the arms but not the legs or the head of a thing and calling it done. She feels necessarily incomplete. Sometimes a woman trips over her own introversion and wants to simply wish things into being. She may think that just thinking the idea is good enough, and there need be no outer manifestation, except she feels bereft and unfinished anyway. These are all manifestations of pollution in the river. What is being manufactured is not life, but something that inhibits life. Other times, she is under attack by those around her, or by the voices yammering in her head. Your work is not right enough, not good enough, not this enough, not that enough. It's too grandiose, too infinitesimal, too insignificant, too long, it's too easy, it's too hard. This is pouring cadmium into the river. There is another story that describes the same process, but uses different symbolism. In Greek mythos, there is an episode wherein the gods decree that a group of birds called harpies shall punish a soul named Phineas. Each time Phineas's food is magically laid out, the flock flies in, steals some of the food, scatters some, and defecates on the rest, leaving the poor man ravenously hungry. This literal pollution can also be understood figuratively as a string of complexes within the psyche whose sole raison d'être is to foul things up. This tale is most definitely a Tremblant shiver story. It makes us shiver in recognition, for we have all experienced this. The harpy syndrome destroys via denigration of one's talents and efforts, and through a most disparaging internal dialogue. A woman brings up an idea, and the harpy shits upon it. The woman says, well, I thought I would do this, and the harpy says, that's a stupid idea. No one cares about that. It's ridiculously simplistic. Well, mark my words. Your ideas are all done. People will laugh. You really have nothing to say. This is harpy talk. Excuses are another form of pollution. From women writers, painters, dancers, and other artists, I have heard every excuse concocted since the earth cooled. Oh, I'll get around to it one of these days. In the meantime, she has the grinning depression. I keep busy. Yes, I squeeze in my writing here and there, and why, I wrote 2 poems last year, and yeah, finished 1 painting and part of another over the last 18 months. Yeah, the house, the kids, the husband, the boyfriend, the cat, the toddler need my consummate attention. I'm going to get around to it. I don't have the money. I do not have the time. I can't find the time, can't make the time. I can't start till I've finished the finest, most expensive instruments or experiences. I just don't feel like it right now. The mood isn't right yet. I need another day's rest. At least a whole day's worth of time to get it done. I need to have a few days' time to get it done. I need to have a few weeks of time to myself to get it done. Fire on the river. Back in the 1970s, the Cuyahoga River at Cleveland became so polluted it began to burn. Pollutive creative flow can suddenly erupt in a toxic fire. It burns not only the fuel of garbage in the river, but incinerates all the life forms as well. Too many psychic complexes, all working at the same time, can cause immense damage to the river. Negative psychological complexes rear up and question your worth, your intention, your sincerity, and your talent. They also send exhortations that assert unequivocally that you must labor to earn a living, doing things that exhaust you, leave you no time to create, destroying your will to imagine. Some of the malevolent complexes, favorite thieveries, and punishment of a woman's creative role revolve around promising the soul self that when one has several days in a row free, then the rumpus will begin at last. It's hogwash. The complex has no such intention. It is another way of suffocating the creative impulse. Alternatively, the voices may whisper, only if you have a doctorate degree will your work be decent. Only if you are lauded by the Queen. Only if you receive such and such award. Only if you are published in such and such a magazine. Only if. This only ifing is like stuffing the soul with junk food. It is one thing to be fed with any old thing. It's quite another to be truly nourished. Most often the logic of the complex is extremely faulty, even though it will try to convince you otherwise. One of the greater problems of the creative complex is the accusation that whatever you're doing won't work, because you're not thinking logically, you're not being logically, what you've done so far isn't logical, and therefore it's doomed to failure. First of all, the primary stages of creating are simply not logical, nor should they be. If the complex succeeds in stopping you with this, it has you. Tell it to sit down and be quiet or go away until you're done. Remember, if logic were all there really was to the world, surely then all men would ride side saddle. I've seen women work long hours at jobs they despise in order to buy very expensive items for their houses, mates, or children. They put their considerable talents on the back burner. I've seen women insist on cleaning everything in the house before they could sit down to write. And you know, it's a funny thing about house cleaning. It just never comes to an end. Perfect way to stop a woman. A woman must be careful not to allow over-responsibility or over-respectability to steal her necessary creative rests, riffs, and raptures. She must put her foot down and say no to half of what she believes she should be doing. Art is not meant to be created in stolen moments only. Art is not meant to be created in stolen moments only. The scattering of plans and projects, as if by a wind, occurs when a woman attempts to organize a creative idea, and it just somehow keeps being blown away, becoming more and more confused and disordered. She is not tracking it in any concrete way, because again, she doesn't have the time to write it all down and organize it, or she is called by so many other things that she loses her place and cannot pick it up again. It may also be that a woman's creative process is misunderstood or disrespected by those around her. It's up to her to inform them that when she has that look in her eyes, it does not mean that she is a vacant lot waiting to be filled. It means that she is balancing a big card house of ideas on a single fingertip. And she is carefully connecting all the cards using tiny crystalline bones and a little spit. If she can just get it all to the table without it falling down or flying apart, she can bring an image from the unseen world into being. To speak to her in that moment is to create a harpy wind that blows the entire structure to tatters. To speak to her in that moment is to break her heart. And yet a woman may do this to herself by talking away her ideas until all the arousal is gone from them. Or by not putting her foot down about people creeping off with her creative tools and materials. Or by the simple oversight of not buying the right equipment to execute the creative work properly. Or by stopping and starting so many times, by allowing everyone and their cat to interrupt her at will. That project falls into a shambles. If the culture in which a woman lives attacks the creative function of its members, if it splits or shatters any archetype or forbids its design or meaning, these will be incorporated in their broken state into the psyches of its members in the same way, as a broken winged force, rather than a hale one filled with vitality and possibility. When these injured elements about how to allow the creative life and how to nourish it are activated within a woman's psyche, it is hard to have a dit of wisdom into what is wrong. Being in a complex is like being inside a black bag. It is dark. You cannot see what has a hold of you. You only know you're captured by a something. Then we are temporarily unable to organize our thoughts and priorities. Like bagged creatures, we begin to act without contemplation. Although acting without contemplation may be very useful at times, such as in the premise of first thought, right thought, in this instant, it is not so. During a poisoned or stalled creation, a woman gives the beautiful soul self pretend eating. She tries to disregard the condition of the animus, so she throws a little workshop to it here and drops a little reading time for it there. But in the end, this has no substance. The woman is kidding no one but herself. So when this river dies, it is without its flow, without its life force. The Hindus say that without Shakti, the personified feminine life force Shiva, who encompasses the ability to act, becomes a corpse. She is the life energy that animates the male principle, and the male principle in turn animates action in the world. So we see that the river must be reasonably balanced between its pollution and its cleansings, or else all comes to nothing. But in order to carry on in this manner, the immediate environment must be nutritive and accessible. In matters of survival, it is an incontrovertible fact that the less available the essentials, food, water, safety, and shelter, the fewer the options, and the fewer the options, the less creative life, for creativity thrives on the many, on the endless combinations of all things. The destructive hidalgo in the tale is a deep but immediately recognizable part of a wounded woman. He is her animus, who causes her to struggle not with creating, often she cannot even get to that point, but rather with her gaining a clear permission, a solid inner support system to create at will. A healthy animus is meant to involve himself in the work of the river, and this is as it should be. Well integrated, he is the helper, watching to see if anything need be done. But in the Llorona story, the animus is one-sided. He takes over, prevents vital new life, and insists on dominating the life of the psyche. When a malignant animus gains such power, a woman may denigrate her own work, or else at the other extreme, attempt to fake real work. When any of these take place, a woman has fewer and fewer creative options. Animus gains power to push the woman around, denigrates her work, thereby inauthenticating it in one way or another. He does this by ruining the river. Let us look first at the parameters of the animus in general. Then we can proceed to understanding how a woman's creative life deteriorates when there is negative animus influence, and what she can and must do about it. Creativity is meant to be an act of clear consciousness. Its actions reflect the clarity of the river. The animus, that which funds our outer action, is the man on the river. He is the steward. He is caregiver and protector of the water. The man on the river. Before we can understand what the man in the Llorona story has done by polluting the river, we have to see how what he represents is meant to be a positive construct in the woman's psyche. By classical Jungian definition, animus is the soul force in women and is considered masculine. However, many women psychoanalysts, including myself, have, through personal observation, come to refute the classical view and to assert instead that the revivifying source in women is not masculine and alien to her, but feminine and familiar. Nevertheless, I believe the masculine concept of animus has great relevance. There is tremendous correlation between women who are afraid to create, afraid to manifest their ideas in the world, or else are doing so in some manner that is disrespectful or haphazard, and their dreams may present many images of injured or injuring men. Conversely, the dreams of women strong in outer manifesting ability often feature a strong male figure who consistently appears in various guises. Animus can best be understood as a force that assists women in acting in their own behalf in the outer world. Animus helps a woman put forth her specific and feminine inner thoughts and feelings in concrete ways, emotionally, sexually, financially, creatively, and otherwise, rather than in a construct that patterns itself after a culturally imposed standard of masculine development in any given culture. The male figures in women's dreams seem to indicate that the animus is not the soul of a woman, but of, from, and for the soul of a woman. In its balanced and non-perverted form, animus is an essential bridging man. This figure often has wondrous capabilities that cause him to rise to the work as bringer and bridger. He is like a merchant of soul. He imports and exports knowledge and products. He chooses the best of what is offered, arranges the best prices, supervises the integrity of the exchanges, follows up and follows through. Another way to understand this is to think of wild woman, the soul self, as the artist, and the animus as the arm of the artist. Wild woman is the driver. The animus hustles up the vehicle. She makes the song, he scores it. She imagines, he offers advice. Without him, the play is created in one's imagination, but never written down and never performed. Without him, the stage may be filled to bursting, but the curtains never part, and the marquee remains dark. If we are to translate the healthy animus into Spanish metaphor, he would be el agrimensor, the surveyor who knows the lay of the land, and with his compass and his thread measures the distance between 2 points. He defines the edges and establishes boundaries. Also call him el jugador, the gamesman, the one who studies and knows how and where to place the marker to gain or to win. These are some of the most important aspects of a robust animus. So the animus travels the road between 2 territories, and sometimes 3, underworld, inner world, and outer world. All women's feelings and ideas are bundled up and carted across those spans in every direction by the animus, who has a feeling for all worlds. He brings ideas from out there back to her, and he carries ideas from her soul self across the bridge to fruition and to market. Without the builder and maintainer of this land bridge, a woman's inner life cannot be manifested with intent in the outer world. You needn't call him animus, call him by what words or images you like, but also understand that there are currently within women's culture a suspicion of the masculine. For some, a fear of needing the masculine. For others, a painful recovery from being crushed by it in some way. Generally, this wariness comes from the barely beginning to be healed traumas from family and culture during times previous, times when women were treated as serfs, not selves. It is still fresh in wild women's memory that there was a time when gifted women were tossed away as refuge, when a woman could not have an idea unless she secretly embedded and fertilized it in a man, who then carried it out into the world under his own name. But ultimately, I think, we cannot throw away any metaphor that helps us see and be. I wouldn't trust a palette that had red missing from it, or blue, or yellow, or black, or white, and neither would you. The animus is a primary color in the palette of the female psyche. So, rather than being the soul nature of women, animus, or the contrasexual nature of women, it is a profound psychic intelligence with ability to act. It travels back and forth between worlds, between the various nodes of the psyche. This force has the ability to extrovert and to act out the desires of the ego, to carry out the impulses and ideas of the soul, to elicit a woman's creativity in manifest and concrete ways. The key aspect to a positive animus development is actual manifestation of cohesive inner thoughts, impulses, and ideas. Though we speak here of positive animus development, there is also a caveat. An integral animus is developed in full consciousness and with much work of self-examination. If one does not carefully peer into one's motives and appetites each step of the way, a poorly developed animus results. This deleterious animus can and will senselessly carry out unexamined ego impulses, pumping out various blind emotions and fulfilling myriad unexamined appetites. Further, animus is an element of woman's psyche that must be exercised, given regular workouts, in order for her to be able to act in whole ways. If the useful animus is neglected in a woman's psychic life, it atrophies exactly like a muscle that has lain inert too long. While some women theorize that a warrior woman nature, the Amazonian nature, the huntress nature, can supplant this masculine within the feminine element, there are, to my sights, many shades and layers of masculine nature, such as certain kind of intellectual rule-making, law-giving, boundary setting, that are extremely valuable to women who live in the modern world. These masculine attributes do not arise from women's instinctual psychic temperament in the same form or tone as those of her feminine nature. So, living as we do in a world that requires both meditative and outward action, I find it very useful to utilize the concept of a masculine nature or animus in a woman. In proper balance, animus acts as helper, helpmate, lover, brother, father, king. This does not mean animus is king of the woman's psyche, as an injured patriarchal point of view might have it. It means that there is a kingly aspect existent in the woman's psyche, a kingly element that, when developed attitudinally, acts and mediates in loving service to the wild nature. Archetypally, the king symbolizes a force that is meant to work in a woman's behalf and for her well-being, governing what she and soul assign to him, ruling over whatever psychic lands are granted to him. So that is how it is supposed to be. But in the tale, the animus has sought out other goals at the expense of the wild nature, and as the river fills up with waste, the flow itself begins to poison other aspects of the creative psyche, and eventually the unborn children of the woman. What does it mean when the psyche has given the animus the power of the river and it is misused? Someone told me when I was a child that it was easy to create for good as it was to create for bad. I have not found this to be so. It is far harder to keep the river clear. It is far easier to let it moulder. Let us say that keeping the flow clear is a natural challenge we all face. We hope to remedy clouding as quickly and extensively as we are able. But what if something takes over the creative flow, making it muddier and muddier? What if we become trapped in that? What if we somehow perversely begin to somehow derive issue from it? Not only like it, but rely on it, make a living by it, feel alive through it. What if we use it to get us out of bed in the morning and to take us somewhere, to make us somebody in our own mind? Those are traps that wait for all of us. The hidalgo in this story represents an aspect of women's psyche that, to put it colloquially, has gone bad. It has become corrupt. It derives benefit from its manufacturing of poison. It is somehow tied to an unhealthy life. He is like a king who rules through misguided hunger. He is neither wise nor can he ever be loved by the woman he purports to serve. It is very good for a woman to have in her psyche a devoted animus figure, strong, able to see far, hearing both in the outer world and the underworld, able to predict what is likely to occur next, deciding laws and justice by the sum of what he senses and sees in all worlds. But the one in this story is an infidel. The role of the animus as portrayed by the well-realized hidalgo, king or mentor in a woman's psyche is supposed to be able to help her realize her possibilities and goals, make manifest the ideas and ideals she holds dear, weigh the justice and integrity of things, take care of the armaments, strategize when she is threatened, help her unite all her psychic territories. When the animus has become a menace, the way we see in this woman's tale, a woman loses confidence in her decisions. As her animus becomes more weakened by its one-sidedness, its falsehoods, thefts, posturings to and about her, the water of the river turns from something that is essential to life to something to be approached with the same caution as a hired killer. Then there is a famine in the land and pollution in the river. To create is creare in Latin. This means to produce, to make life, to produce where there was nothing before. It is the drinking from the polluted river that causes cessation of inner and therefore outer life. In the tale, this pollution causes deformation of the children, and these children represent young ideas and ideals. The children represent our ability to produce a something where there was once a nothing. We can recognize that this deformation of new potential is taking place when we begin to question our ability and especially our legitimacy to think, act, or be. Gifted women, even as they reclaim their creative lives, even as beautiful things flow from their hands, from their pens, from their bodies, still question whether they are writers, painters, artists, people, real ones. And of course, they are real ones, even though they might like to bedevil themselves with what constitutes real. A farmer is a real farmer when she looks out over the lands and plans the spring crops. A runner is real when she takes the first step. A flower is real when it is yet in its mother's stem. A tree is real when it is still a seed in the pine cone. An old tree is a real living being. Real is what has life. Animus, development varies from woman to woman. It is not a perfectly formed creature that springs forth from the thighs of God. It appears to have an innate or inborn quality to it, but also has to grow up, be taught and trained. It is meant to be a strong and direct force, but when there is damage to the animus through all the myriad forces of culture and self, something weary or mean-spirited or deadness, some call being neutral, interposes itself between the inner world of psyche and the outer world of the blank page, clear canvas, waiting dance floor, boardroom, gathering. This something, usually somehow slitty-eyed, misunderstood or misappropriated, clots the river, clogs thinking, jams the pen and the brush, locks the joints for an interminable period of time, crusts over fresh ideas, and thusly we suffer. There is an odd phenomenon in the psyche when a woman is afflicted with a negative animus. Any effort at a creative act touches it off so that it attacks her. She picks up a pen, the factory on the river spews its poison. She thinks about applying to school or takes a class, but stops at the middle, choking on the lack of inward nourishment and support. A woman revs up but continuously falls back. There are unfinished needlework projects, more never realized flower beds, more hikes never taken, more notes never written just to say, I care. More foreign languages never learnt, more music lessons abandoned, more weft hanging on the loom, and waiting, and waiting. These are the deformed life forms. These are La Llorona's poisoned children, and they are all tossed into the river. They are all tossed back into the polluted waters, so afflicted them to begin with. In the best archetypal circumstances, what is supposed to happen is that they burble around and like a phoenix rise from the ashes in new form. But here, something is wrong with the animus, and therefore weights are awry in one's ability to differentiate one impulse from the other, let alone to manifest and implement one's ideas in the world. And the river is so filled with the excrement of complexes, nothing can rise from it for new life. And so here is the hard part. We have to go into the sludge and look for the precious gifts that lie under it all. Like La Llorona, we have to drag the river for our soul life, for our creative lives. Dredge the river? For our soul lives, for our creative lives. And one more thing, also difficult. We must clean up the river so La Llorona can see, so she and we can find the souls of the children and be at peace to create again. The culture makes the factories and pollution worse through its immense power to devalue the feminine and its misunderstanding of the bridging nature of the masculine. Culture too often holds a woman's animus in exile by pressing one of those insoluble and nonsensical questions that complexes pretend are valid, and before which many women are cowed. But are you a real artist, writer, mother, daughter, sister, wife, lover, worker, dancer, person? Are you really talented, gifted, or worthy? Do you really have anything to say that is worthwhile, enlightening, will help humankind, help find a cure for anthrax? Not surprisingly, when a woman's animus is taken up with psychic manufacturing of a negative sort, a woman's output dwindles as her confidence and creative muscles wane. Women in this predicament tell me they cannot see a way out of their so-called writer's block, or for that matter, the cause of it. Their animus is sucking all the oxygen out of the river, and they feel extremely tired and suffer tremendous loss of energy, can't seem to get going, feel held back by something. Taking back the river. The life, death, life, nature causes fate, relationship, love, creativity, and all else to move in large, wild patterns, one following the other in this order: creation, increase, power, dissolution, death, incubation, creation, and so on. Theft or absence of ideas, thoughts, feelings is the outcome of a disturbed flow. Here is how to take back the river. Receive nurturance. To begin the cleanup of the river. Troublesome contaminants in the river are obvious when a woman turns away sincere compliments about her creative life. There may be only a little pollution, as in the offhand, "Oh, how nice you are to give such a compliment," or there may be massive trouble in the river, "Oh, this old thing," or "You must be out of your mind," and also the defensive, "Of course I'm wonderful, how could you fail to notice?" These are all signs of injured animus. Good things flow into the woman, but are immediately poisoned. To reserve the phenomenon, a woman practices taking in the compliment. To reverse the phenomenon, a woman practices taking in the compliment, even if initially it looks as though she is lunging at the compliment in order to keep it for herself this time. Savors it, fights off the malignant animus that wants to tell the giver of the compliment, "That's what you think. You don't really know all the mistakes she's made. You don't really see what a drip she is," etc. Negative complexes are particularly attracted to the juiciest ideas, the most revolutionary and wonderful ideas, the most rampant forms in creativity. So there is no two ways about it. We must summon up a clearer acting animus, and the older one must be laid to rest, that is, sent down into the archival layer of the psyche, where we file away defeated and folded impulses and catalysts. There they become artifacts rather than actors or effects. Respond. That is how to clear the river. Wolves lead immensely creative lives. They make dozens of choices every day, decide this way or that, estimate how far, concentrate on their prey, calculate the chances, seize opportunity, react powerfully to accomplish their goals. Their abilities to find the hidden to coalesce intention, to focus on the desired outcome, and to act on their own behalf to gain it, are the exact characteristics required for creative follow-through in humans. To create, one must be able to respond. Creativity is the ability to respond to all that goes on around us, to choose from the hundreds of possibilities of thought, feeling, action, and recreation that arise within us, and to put these together in a unique response, expression, or message that carries moment, passion, and meaning. In this sense, loss of our creative milieu means finding ourselves limited to only one choice, divested of, suppressing, or censoring feelings and thoughts, not acting, not saying, doing, or being. Be wild. That is how to clear the river. In its original form, the river does not flow in polluted. We manage that. The river does not dry up. We block it. If we want to allow it, its freedom, we have to allow our ideational lives to be let loose, to stream, letting anything come, initially censoring nothing. That is creative life. It is made up of divine paradox. It is entirely interior process. To create, one must be willing to be stone stupid, to sit upon a throne on top of a jackass and spill rubies from one's mouth. Then the river will flow. Then we can stand in the stream of it raining down. We can put out our skirts and shirts to catch as much as we can carry. Begin. This is how to clear the polluted river. If you are scared to fail, I say, begin already. Fail if you must. Pick yourself up. Start again. If you fail again, you fail. So what? Begin again. It's not the failure that holds us back, but the reluctance to begin over again that causes us to stagnate. If you're scared, so what? If you're afraid something's going to leap out and bite you, then for heaven's sake, get over with already. Let your fear leap out and bite you so you can get over it. Get it over with and go on. You will get over it. The fear will pass. In this case, it's better if you meet it head on, feel it, and get it over with, and then than to keep using it to avoid cleaning up the river. Protect your time. This is how to banish pollutants. I know a fierce painter here in the Rockies who hangs the sign on the chain that closes off the road to her house when she's in a painting or thinking mode. I am working today, and I'm not receiving visitors. I know you think this doesn't mean you because you're my banker, agent, or best friend, but it does. Another sculptor I know hangs this sign on her gate. Do not disturb unless I've won the lottery or Jesus has been sighted on the old Teos highway. As you can see, the well-developed animus has excellent boundaries. Stay with it. How to further banish this pollution? By insisting nothing will stop us from exercising the well-integrated animus. By continuing our soul spinning, our wing-making adventures, our art, our psychic mending and sewing, whether we feel strong or not, whether we feel ready or not, if necessary, by tying ourselves to the mast, the chair, the desk, the tree, the cactus, whatever, wherever we create. It is essential, even though often painful, to put in the necessary time, not to skirt the difficult tasks inherent in striving for mastery. A true creative life burns in more ways than one. Negative complexes that arrive along the way are banished or transformed. Your dreams will guide you the last part of the way by putting your foot down, mice, and for all, and by saying, goodness me, by putting your foot down once and for all, and by saying, I love my creative life more than I love cooperating with my oppression. If we were to abuse our children, social services would show up at our doors. If we were to abuse our pets, the Humane Society would come to take us away. But there is no creativity patrol or soul police to intervene if we insist on starving our own souls. There is just us. We are the only ones to watch over the soul self and the heroic animus. It is bitterly harsh to water them once a week or once a month or even once a year. They have their own circadian rhythms. They need us and need the water of our craft every day. Protect your creative life. If you would avoid hamra del alma, the starved soul, name the problem for what it is and fix it. Practice your work every day. Then let no thought, no man, no woman, no mate, no friend, no religion, no job, and no crabbed voice force you into a famine. If necessary, show your incisors. Craft your real work. Build that hut of warmth and knowing. Pull your energy from over there to over here. Insist on balance between pedestrian responsibility and personal rapture. Protect the soul. Insist on quality creative life. Let neither your own complexes, your culture, intellectual detritus, nor any high-sounding aristocratic, pedagogical, or political lala steal it away from you. Lay out nourishment for the creative life. Although many things are good and nutritious for the soul, most fall into Wild Woman's 4 basic food groups: time, belonging, passion, and sovereignty. Stock up. These keep the river clean. When the river is cleansed again, it is free to flow. A woman's creative output increases and therefore continues in natural cycles of increase, decrease, and increase again. Nothing will be carried off or fouled for long. Whatever contaminants occur naturally are neutralized efficiently. The river returns as our system of nourishment, one we can enter without fear, one we could drink from without worry, one beside which we can calm the tormented soul of La Llorona, healing her children and restoring them to her. We can dismantle the polluting process of the factory, seat a new animus. We can live our lives as we wish and as we see fit, there beside the river, holding our many babies in our arms, showing them their reflections in the clear, clear water. Focus and the Fantasy Mill. In North America, the tale of the Little Match Girl is best known in the Hans Christian Andersen version. At its core, it describes what lack of nurture, lack of focus look like, and what they lead to. It is a very old tale, told the world over in various ways. Sometimes it is a charcoal burner who uses his last coals to warm himself while he dreams of times past. In some versions, the symbol of matches is exchanged for something else, as in the little flower seller. Without a broken-hearted man who gazes into the centers of his last flowers and is spirited away from his life. Though some might look at the superficial story rendering and say these are maudlin stories, meaning they have excessive emotional sweetness, it would be a mistake to dismiss them lightly. The stories actually are at their base profound expressions of psyche being negatively mesmerized to the point that real and vibrant life begins to die in spirit. The following Little Match Girl was given to me by my aunt Katerina, who had come to America after World War II. During the war, her simple Hungarian farming village had been overrun and occupied 3 times by 3 different hostile armies. She always began the tale by saying that soft dreams under hard conditions are no good, that in tough times we must have tough dreams, real dreams, that if we will work diligently and drink our milk to the health of the Virgin, will come true. The Little Match Girl. There was a little girl child who had neither mother nor a father, and she lived in the dark forest. There was a village at the edge of the forest, and she learned she could buy matches for a half penny there, and she could sell them on the street for a full penny. If she sold enough matches, she could buy a crust of bread, return to her lean-to in the forest, and sleep there, dressed in all the clothes she owned. The winter came, and it was very cold. She had no shoes, and her coat was so thin she could see through it. Her feet were past the point of being blue. Her toes were white. So were her fingers and the end of her nose. She wandered the streets and begged strangers, would they please buy matches from her? But no one stopped, and no one paid her any attention. So she sat down one evening saying, I have matches. I can light a fire, and I can warm myself. But she had no kindling and no wood. She decided to light the matches anyway. As she sat there with her legs straight out in front of her, she struck the first match. As she did, it seemed that the cold and the snow disappeared altogether. What she saw instead of snow swirling was a room, a beautiful room, with a great dark green ceramic stove, with a door with iron scrollwork. The stove emanated so much heat, it made the air wavy. She snuggled up close to the stove, and it felt heavenly. But all of a sudden the stove went out, and she was sitting again in the snow, shivering so bitterly the bones in her face chimed. And so she struck the second match, and the light fell upon the wall of the building next to where she sat, and she could suddenly see through it. In the room behind the wall was a snowy cloth covering a table, and there on the table were china plates of the purest white, and on a platter was a goose that had just been cooked, and just as she was reaching for this repast, the vision disappeared. She was again in the snow. By now her knees and hips no longer hurt. Now the cold was stinging and burning its way up her arms and torso. So she lit the third match. And in the light of the third match was a beautiful Christmas tree, beautifully decorated with white candles, lacy ruffs, and beautiful glass ornaments, and thousands of little dots of lights she couldn't quite make out. As she looked up the trunk of this enormous tree that went higher and higher, stretched further and further towards the ceiling until it became the stars in the heavens over her head, and suddenly a star blazed across the sky, and she remembered her mother had told her that when a soul dies, a star falls. And out of nowhere, her grandmother appeared, so warm, so kind, and the child felt so happy to see her. The grandmother picked up her apron and put it around the child, held her close with both arms, and the child was content. But the grandmother began to fade, and the child struck more and more matches to keep the grandmother with her, more and more to keep the grandmother with her, and more, and together she and the grandmother began to rise together up into the sky, where there was no cold, no hunger, and no pain. And in the morning, between the houses, the child was found still and gone. Staving off creative fantasy. This child lives in an environment when people do not care. If you are in one of these, get out. The child is in a milieu where what she has, little fires on sticks, the beginnings of all creative possibility, is not valued. If you are in this predicament, turn your back and walk away. This child is in a psychic situation in which there are few options. She has resigned herself to her place in life. If this has happened to you, unresign yourself and come out kicking ass. When Wild Woman is cornered, she does not surrender. She comes ahead, claws out and fighting. What is the match girl to do? If her instincts were intact, her choices would be many. Walk to another town, sneak into a wagon, stow away in a coal cellar. Wild Woman would know what to do next, but the match girl does not know Wild Woman anymore. This little wild child is freezing. All that is left of her is a person that goes about in a trance. Being with real people who warm us, who endorse and exalt our creativity, is essential to the flow of creative life. Otherwise, we freeze. Nurture is a chorus of voices, both from within and without, that notices the state of a woman's being, takes care to encourage it, and if necessary, gives comfort as well. I'm not certain how many friends one needs, but definitely one or two who think your gift, whatever it might be, is pan de cielo, the bread of heaven. Every woman is entitled to an Alleluia chorus. When women are out in the cold, they tend to live on fantasies instead of action. Fantasy of this sort is an anesthetizer of women. I know women who have been gifted with beautiful voices. I know women who are natural storytellers. Almost everything out of their mouths is freshly formed and finely wrought, but they are isolated or feel disenfranchised in some way. They are shy, which is often a cover for a starving animus. They have difficulty gaining a sense that they are supported from within or by friends, family, or community. To avoid being the little match girl, there is one major action you must take. Anyone who does not support your art, your life, is not worth your time. Harsh, but true. Otherwise, one walks right in and dresses in the rags of the match girl and is compelled to live a quarter life that freezes all thought, hope, gifts, writing, playings, designing, and dancing. warmth should be the major pursuit of the little match girl, but in the story it is not. Instead, she tries to sell off the matches, her sources of warmth. Doing so leaves the feminine no warmer, no richer, no wiser, and with no further development. Warmth is a mystery. It somehow heals and engenders us. It is the loosener of too tight things. It enhances flow, the mysterious urge to be, the maiden flight of ideas. Whatever warmth is, it draws us closer and closer yet. The match girl is not an environment where she can thrive, not in an environment where she can thrive. There is no warmth, no kindling, no firewood. If we were in her place, what could we do? We could first of all not entertain the fantasy land the match girl builds up by lighting matches. There are 3 kinds of fantasies. The first is a pleasure fantasy, a form of mind ice cream, strictly for enjoyment, such as daydreams. The second kind of fantasy is intentional imaging. This kind of fantasy is like a planning session. It's used as a vehicle to take us forward into action. All successes, psychological, spiritual, financial, and creative, begin with fantasies of this nature. Then there is a kind of fantasy, the kind that brings everything to a halt. This is a kind of fantasy that hinders right action, hiring critical times. Unfortunately, this is the kind the match girl spins. It is a fantasy that has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with feeling nothing can be done, or that a thing is too hard to do. So one might as well sink into idle fantasy. Sometimes the fantasy is in a woman's mind. Sometimes it comes to her through a liquor bottle, a needle, or lack of one. Sometimes the smoke of weed is the transporter, or many forgettable rooms complete with bed and stranger. Women in these situations are playing out the little match girl in their every night of fantasies and more fantasies, and waking up dead and frozen at every daybreak. There are many ways to lose one's intent, to lose one's focus. So what will reverse this and restore soul esteem and self-esteem? We have to find something very different than what the match girl had. We have to take our ideas to a place where there is support for them. This is an enormous step, concomitant with focus, to find nurture. Very few of us can create solely under our own steam. We need all the pats from angel wings that we can find. Most of the time, people have wonderful ideas. I'm going to paint that wall a color I like. I'm going to create a project the entire town can be involved with. I'm going to make some tiles for my bathroom, and if I really like them, I'll sell some of them. I'm going back to school, sell my house and travel, have a child, leave this and begin that, go my way, clean up my act, help her right this injustice or that, protect the unprotected. Those kinds of projects need nurture. They need vital support from warm people. Little Match Girl is tattered, like the old folk song. She's been down so long, it looks like up to her. No one can thrive at her level. We must put ourselves in a situation there, where, like plants and trees, we can turn towards the sun. But there has to be a sun. To do this, we have to move, not just sit there. We have to do something that makes our situation different. Without a move, we are back out on the streets selling matches again. Friends who love you and have warmth for your creative life are the best sons in the world. When a woman, like the little match girl, has no friends, she also becomes frozen by anguish, and sometimes by anger as well. Even if one has friends, those friends may not be sons. They may give comfort instead of informing the woman about her increasingly frozen circumstances. They comfort her, but that is far different from nurture. Nurture moves you from one place to another. Nurture is like psychic Wheaties. The difference between comfort and nurture is this. If you have a plant that is sick because you keep it in a dark closet and you say soothing words to it, that is comfort. If you take the plant out of the closet, put it in the sun, give it something to drink, and then talk to it, that is nurture. The frozen woman, without nurture, is inclined to turn to incessant what-if daydreams. But even if she is in this frozen condition, especially if she is in such a frozen condition, she must refuse the comforting fantasy. The comforting fantasy will kill us dead, for certain. You know how lethal fantasies go. Someday, and if only I had, and he will change, and if I could just learn to control myself. When I get really ready, when I have enough X, Y, and Z, when the kids are grown, when I am more secure, when I find someone else. And as soon as and so on. The little match girl has an internal grandmother who, instead of barking, wake up, get up, no matter what it takes, find warmth, takes her away into a fantasy life, takes her to heaven. But heaven will not help the wild woman, the trapped wild child, or the little match girl in this situation. These comforting fantasies must not be ignited. They are seductive and lethal distractions from the real work. We see the match girl making some kind of trade-off, some kind of ill-conceived commerce in the story, when the child sells her matches, the only thing that might keep her warm. Women are disconnected from the nurturing love of the wild mother. They are on the equivalent of a subsistence diet in the outer world. The ego is just eking out a life, just taking the barest of nourishment from without, and returning each night from whence she began, over and over. There she sleeps, exhausted. She cannot waken to a life with a future, because her wretched life is like a hook upon which she hangs daily. In initiations, spending a significant period of time under difficult conditions is part of a dismemberment that severs one from ease and complacently. As an initiatory passage, it will come to a conclusion, and the newly sanded down woman will commence a refreshed and enlivened spiritual and creative life. However, women in the match girl condition could be said to be involved in an initiation that has gone awry. The hostile conditions do not serve to deepen, only to decimate. Another venue, another environ, with different supports and guides must be chosen. Historically, and particularly in men's psychology, illness, exile, and suffering are often understood as an initiatory dismemberment, sometimes carrying great meaning. But for women, there are additional archetypes of initiation that arise out of women's innate psychology and physicality. Giving birth is one, the power of blood is another, as being in love or receiving nurturant love, as is being in love or receiving nurturant love. Being given the blessing by someone she looks up to, being taught in a deep and supported way by one older than she, all these are initiations that are intense and have their own tensions and resurrections. The match girl could be said to have come so close, yet remained so far from the transitional stage of movement and action that would have completed the initiation. While she has the materials for an initiatory experience in her wretched life, there is no one within or without to guide the psychic process. Psychically, in the most negative sense, winter brings the kiss of death. That is, a coldness to anything it touches. Coldness spells the end of any relationship. If you want to kill something, just be cold to it. As soon as one becomes frozen in feeling, thinking, or action, relationship is not possible. When humans want to abandon something in themselves or leave someone else out in the cold, they ignore them, disinvite them, leave them out, go out of their way to have to even hear their voice or lay eyes upon them. This is the situation of the psyche of the match girl. The match girl wanders the streets and she begs strangers to buy matches from her. This scene shows one of the most disconcerting things about injured instinct in woman, the giving of light for little price. The little lights on sticks here are like the bigger lights, the skulls on the sticks in the Vasilisa story. They represent women, they represent wisdom, and more importantly, they ignite consciousness, replacing dark with light, relighting that which has burnt out. Fire is the major symbol of the revivifactor in the psyche. Here we have the match girl in great need, begging to be given to, offering in fact a thing of far greater value, a light, than value received in return, a penny. Whether this great value given for less value received is within our psyche or experienced by us in the outer world, the outcome is the same, more loss of energy. Then a woman cannot respond to her own needs. Something that wants to live begs for it, but is not answered. Here we have someone who, like Sophia, the Greek spirit of wisdom, takes light from the abyss, but sells it off in fits and starts of useless fantasy. Bad lovers, rotten bosses, exploitative situations, wily complexes of all sorts tempt a woman into these choices. When the match girl decides to burn the matches, she uses her resources to fantasize instead of act. She uses her energy in a momentary kind of way. This shows up in obvious ways in a woman's life. She's determined to go to college, but she takes 3 years to make up her mind which one. She's going to do that series of paintings, but since she has no place to hang such a show, she doesn't make painting a priority. She wants to do this or that, but she doesn't take the time to learn, to develop sensitivity or skill to do it well. She has 10 notebooks full of dreams, but is caught in her fascination with interpretation and cannot put their meanings into action. She knows she must leave, begin, stop, go, but she doesn't. And so we see why, when a woman is frozen of feeling, when she can no longer feel herself, when her blood, her passion, no longer reaches the extremities of her psyche, when she is desperate, then a fantasy life is far more pleasurable than anything else she can set her sights upon. Her little match lights, because they have no wood to burn, instead burn up the psyche as though it were a big dry log. The psyche begins to play tricks on itself. It lives now in the fantasy fire of all yearning fulfilled. This kind of fantasizing is like a lie. If you tell it often enough, you begin to believe it. The sort of conversion angst, wherein problems or issues are diminished by enthusiastically fantasizing unrealizable solutions or nicer times, does not only assail women, it is the major stumbling block of all humankind. The stove in the match girl fantasy represents warm thoughts. It's also a symbol of the center, the heart, the hearth. It tells us her fantasy is for the true self, the heart of the psyche, the warmth of a home within. But all of a sudden the stove goes out. The match girl, like all women in this psychic predicament, finds herself back sitting in the snow again. Here we see this kind of fantasy is brief but intensely destructive. It has nothing to burn but our energy. Even though a woman might use her fantasy to keep herself warm, she still winds up in the deep freeze. The match girl lights more matches. Each fantasy burns out, and again the child is in the snow and freezing. When the psyche freezes, a woman is turned towards herself and no one else. She lights a third match. This is the fairy tale 3, the magic number, the point at which something new should happen. But in this case, because fantasy overwhelms action, nothing new occurs. It is ironic that the story contains a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree evolved from a pre-Christian symbol of everlasting life, the evergreen. One considered it is this that might save her. The idea of the evergreen, ever-growing, ever-moving soul psyche. But the room has no ceiling. The idea of life cannot be contained in the psyche. The mesmerizing has taken hold. The grandmother is so warm, so kind, yet she is the final morphia, the final dram of hemlock. She draws the child into the sleep of death. In its most negative sense, this is the sleep of complacency, the sleep of numbness. It is all right, I can stand it. The sleep of denial, I just look the other way. This is the sleep of malignant fantasy, wherein we hope all travail will magically disappear. It is a psychic fact that when the libido or energy wanes to the point where its breath is no longer shows on the mirror, some representation of the life-death-life nature shows up, here portrayed by the grandmother. It is her work to arrive at the death of something, to incubate the soul that has left its husk behind, and to care for the soul until it can be born anew. And that is the blessedness of everyone's psyche. Even in the event of such a painful ending of the match girls, there is a ray of light. When enough time, discontent, and pressure have been brought to bear, the wild woman of the psyche will hurl new life into a woman's mind, giving her an opportunity to act on her own behalf once more. As we can see from the suffering involved, it is better to heal one's addiction to fantasy than wait around wishing and hoping to be raised from the dead. Renewing the creative fire. So now let us imagine that we have everything all together. We are dear about our intention. We are not drowning in escapist fantasy. That should be clear. We are clear about our intention. We're not drowning in escapist fantasy. We are integrated, and our creative life flourishes. We need one more attribute. We need to know what to do if or but when we lose focus. Okay. We need to know what to do, not if, but when we lose focus. That is, we bear down for a time. What? After all this work, we might lose our focus? Yes, it will only be lost temporarily, but it is the natural order. Here is a fine tale about it that our family called the 3 gold hairs. There is a saying in our family that a story has wings. Via trans-ocean migrations by Magyar family, foster family, a number of the stories I carry flew over the Carpathian mountains with them when they fled their villages during the wars. There they are lodged for a time in the Urals, then sailing over an ocean to North America. The little ragged band and their stories, shaped by their experiences, then traveled overland through the great forest of the Great Lakes Basin. The little core of the 3 gold hairs was given to me by my Tanta Kata, a gifted healer and powerful prayer maker who grew up in Eastern Europe, and I have amplified that kernel here. In my research, I have spotted quite different Teutonic and Celtic stories that revolve around the leitmotif of golden hair. The leitmotif or kernel of a story represents an archetypal juncture in the psyche, that is the nature of archetypes. They deposit some nuance of themselves at the point of contact with psyche. As symbolic representations, they sometimes leave behind an evidence, wending their ways into life stories, dreams, and ideas of every mortal. Dwelling, who knows where, the archetypes constitute, one might say, a set of psyche instructions that traverse time and space and enwisen each new generation. The theme of this story is about how one regains focus once one has lost it. Focus is composed of sensing, hearing, and following the directions of the soul voice. Many women are quite good at focusing, but when they lose touch with it, they become scattered like a feather bed, burst all over the countryside. It is important to have a container for all that we sense and hear from the wild nature. For some women it is their journals where they keep track of every feather that flies by. For others it is the creative art. They dance it, paint it, make it into a script. Remember Baba Yaga? She has a big pot. She moves through the sky in a cauldron that is actually a pestle and mortar. In other words, she has a container in which to put things. She has a way of thinking, a way of moving from one place to another that is contained. Yes, containment is the solution to the problem of all loss of energy. That and one more thing. Let us see. The 3 golden hairs. Once when it was deepest, darkest night, the sort of night when the land is black and the trees seem like gnarled hands against the dark blue sky. It was on exactly this kind of night that a lone old man staggered through the forest. Though boughs scratched his face, half blinding his eyes, he held out a tiny lantern before him. Therein The candle burned lower and lower. The old man was a sight to behold, with his long yellow hair, cracked yellow teeth, and curved amber fingernails. His back was rounded like a bag of flour, and so ancient was he that his skin hung in furbelows from chin, arms, and hips. The old one progressed through the forest by grasping a sapling and pulling his body forward, grasping another sapling and pulling himself forward, and with this rowing motion, and by the small breath left in him, he made his way through the forest. Every bone in his feet pained like fire. The owls in the trees screeched right along with his joints as he propelled himself forwards in the dark. Way off in the distance there was a tiny flickering light, a cottage, a fire, a home, a place of rest, and he laboured towards that little light. Just as he reached the door, he was so tired, so exhausted. The tiny light in his little lantern died, and the old man fell through the door and collapsed. Inside was an old woman, sitting before a beautiful roaring fire, and now she hurried to his side, gathered him into her arms, and carried him to the fire. She held him in her arms as a mother holds her child. She sat and rocked him in her rocking chair. There they were, the poor, frail old man, just a sack of bones, and the strong old woman, rocking him back and forth, saying, "There, there, 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 there." She rocked him all through the night, and by the time it was not yet morning, but almost, he had grown much younger. He was now a beautiful young man, with golden hair and long, strong limbs, and she rocked him, "There, there, 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 there." As morning approached even more closely, the young man had turned into a very small and very beautiful child, with golden hair plaited like wheat. Just at the moment of dawn, the old woman plucked 3 hairs very quickly from the child's beautiful head and threw them to the tiles. They sounded like this: ting, ting, ting. And the little child in her arms crawled down from her lap and ran to the door. Looking back at the old woman for a moment, he gave her a dazzling smile, then turned and flew up into the sky to become the brilliant morning sun. Things are different at night, so to understand the story one must ascend to a night consciousness, a state in which we are more quickly aware of every creak and snap. Night is when we are closer to ourselves, closer to essential ideas and feelings that do not register so much during daylight hours. In mythos, night is the world of Mother Nyx, the woman who made the world. She is the old mother of days, one of the life and death crones. When it is night in a fairy tale, for interpretation's sake, we know we are in the unconscious San Juan de la Cruz, St. John of the Cross, called such the dark night of the soul. In this tale, night typifies a time when energy in the form of an old man becomes weaker and weaker. It is a time when we are on our last foot in some important way. To lose focus means to lose energy. The absolutely wrong thing to attempt when we've lost focus is to rush about struggling to pack it all back together again. Rushing is not the thing to do. As we see in the tale, sitting and rocking is the thing to do. Patience, peace. The rocking renews ideas. Just holding the idea and the patience to rock it are what some women might call a luxury. Wild Woman says it is a necessity. This is something the wolves know all about. When an intruder appears, wolves may growl, bark, or even bite the interloper. But also they may, from a good distance, draw back into their group and to sit together as a family would. They just sort of sit there and breathe together. Rib cages go in and out and up and down. They are focusing themselves, regrounding themselves, returning to the center of themselves and deciding what is critical, what to do next. They are deciding they're not going to do anything right now. Just sit here and breathe. Just going to rock together. Now, many times when ideas aren't unfolding or operating smoothly, or we aren't working them well, we lose focus. It is part of a natural cycle, and it occurs because the idea has gotten stale, or we have lost our ability to see it in a fresh way. We have ourselves grown old and creaky, like the old man and the 3 gold hairs. Although there are many theories on creative blocks, the truth is that mild ones come and go, like weather patterns and like seasons, with the exceptions of the psychological blocks we talked about earlier, such as not getting down to one's truth, fear of being rejected, being afraid to say what one knows, worrying about one's adequacy, pollution of the basic flow, settling for mediocrity or pale imitations, and so on. This story is so excellent because it delineates the entire cycle of an idea, the little tiny light accorded it, which of course is the idea itself, and that it becomes fatigued and is near extinguished. All is a part of its natural cycle. In fairy tales, when something bad happens, it means that something new has to be tried. A new energy has to be introduced. A helper, a healer, a magic force has to be consulted. Here again we see old Jacqui, the 2-million-year-old woman. She is the one who knows. To be held in her arms before her fire is restorative, reparative. It is to this fire and to her arms that the old man drags himself, for without these he will die. The old man is tired out from long time at the work we give him. Have you ever seen a woman work like the devil, and like the devil had hold of her big toe, only to suddenly collapse and go no further? Have you ever seen a woman's hells a-poppin' about some social issue, only to one day turn her back and say, oh, to hell with it? Her animus is worn out, is in need of rocking by Jacqui. The woman whose idea or energy has waned, withered, or ceased altogether needs to know the way to hold to this old woman, curandera, healer, and must carry the tired animus there for renewal. I work with many women who are deeply involved in social activism. There is no doubt about it. At the far turn of this cycle, they become tired out, dragging themselves through the forest on creaking legs, the lantern flickering, ready to go out. This is the time when they say, I've had it, I quit, I'm turning in my press pass, my badge, my union suit, my whatever it is. They're going to immigrate to Auckland. They're going to watch TV and eat bean-curd cookies and never look out the window into the world again. They're going to buy bad shoes, move to a neighborhood where nothing ever happens. They're going to watch the shopping channel for the rest of their lives. From now on, they're going to mind their own business, look the other way, and so on, and so on. Whatever their idea of respite, even though they are speaking from abject tiredness and frustration, I say that respite is a good idea. It is time to rest, to which they usually screech, rest! How can I rest when the whole world is going to hell right before my very eyes? But in the end, a woman must rest. Rock now. Rest now. Regain her focus. She must become younger, recover her energy. She thinks she cannot, but she can. For the circle of women, be they mothers, students, artists, or activists, always closes to fill in for those who go on rest leave. A creative woman has to rest now and return to her intense work later. She has to go and see the old woman in the forest, the revivifier, the wild woman in one of her many leitmotifs. Wild woman expects that the animus will wear out on a regular basis. She's not shocked that he falls through her door. She's not shocked when we fall through the door. She's ready. She will not rush us into a panic. She will just pick us up and hold us until we regain our power again. And neither should we panic when we lose our momentum or focus, but like her, we must calmly hold the idea and be with it a while. Whether our focus is on self-development, world issues, or relationship, doesn't matter. The animus will wear down. It does not matter if, it is a matter of when. Completing long endeavors, such as finishing school, concluding a manuscript, fulfilling one's opus, caregiving an ill person, all these have their times when the once young energy turns old, falls down, and can go no longer. For women, it is best that they understand this at the outset of an endeavor, for women tend to be surprised by fatigue. They wail, they mutter, they whisper about failure, inadequacy, and such and such. No, this losing of energy is as it is. It is nature. The assumption of eternal strength in the masculine is an error. It is a cultural interject that must be routed from the psyche. This misconception causes both the masculine energies in the inner landscape and the males in the culture to feel an unwarranted sense of failure if they tire or need rest. All naturally need a break to restore strength. The modus operandi of the life-death-life nature is cyclical and applies to everyone and all things. In the story, 3 hairs are thrown to the floor. In my family there is a saying, throw some gold on the floor. This is derived from a deprender las palabras, which in the tradition of cuentistas, storytellers and healers in my family, means to throw away some of the words of the story in order to make it stronger. The hair is symbolic of thought, that which issues from the head. To throw away some To throw some away or down makes the boy child somehow lighter, causing him to shine even more brightly. Likewise, your worn-out idea or endeavor can shine more brightly if you take some of it and throw it away. It is the same idea as the sculptor removing more marble in order to reveal more of what's hidden beneath. A powerful way to renew or strengthen one's intention or action that has become fatigued is to throw some ideas away and focus. Take 3 hairs out of your endeavor and throw them to the ground. There they become like a wake-up call. Throwing them down makes a psychic noise, a chime, a resonance in a woman's spirit that causes activity to occur again. The sound of some of one's many ideas falling away becomes like an announcement of a new era or a new opportunity. In reality, old La Sabe is giving the masculine a light pruning. We know that cutting away the dead wood helps a tree to grow stronger. We also know that pinching off the heads of blossoms of certain plants helps them grow far more bushy, far more lush. For the wildish woman, the animus cycle of increase and decrease is natural. It is an archaic process, an ancient process, time out of mind. It is how women approach the world of ideas, the outer manifestation of them. This is how women do it. The old woman in the fairy tale, the 3 gold hairs, teaches us, reteaches us really, how it is done. So what is the point of this reclamation and focus, this calling back of what has been lost, this running with the wolves? It is to go for the jugular, to get right down to the seed and to the bones of everything and anything in your life, because that's where your pleasure is, that's where your joy is, that's where a woman's Eden lies. That place where there is time and freedom to be, wander, write, sing, create, and not be afraid. When wolves perceive pleasure or danger, they at first become utterly still. They become like statues, utterly focused, so they can see, so they can hear, so they can sense what is there in its most elemental form. This is what the wildest nature offers us, the ability to see what is before us through focusing, through stopping and looking, and smelling and listening, and feeling and tasting. Focusing is the use of all of our senses, including intuition. It is into this world that women come in order to claim their own voices, their own values, their imaginations, their clairvoyance, their clear seeing, their stories, and the ancient memories of women. And these are the work of focus and creation. If you've lost focus, just sit down and be still. Take the idea and rock it to and fro. Keep some of it and throw some away. and it will renew itself. You need do no more.